Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Tagalog Time with Pat. This is episode 4, and today we're going to be learning how to conjugate verbs in the past and future tense. So this is actually a continuation of episode 3, where we learned how to conjugate verbs in the present tense. So I highly encourage you to go back and watch episode 3, where I go over what it means to even conjugate a verb, just giving an overview of Tagalog verb types and everything like that. And then also some practice and conjugation patterns on how to conjugate verbs in the present tense. So since this is kind of a continuation, I encourage you to go back and watch episode 3 if you have not watched it yet, because we will be building upon those ideas that we've already learned so far. Okay, so in Tagalog, have you ever wanted to say something like, I ate something earlier today, or she slept early? So anything in the past tense. Or have you ever wanted to say something like they will cook something, or we will use something? So things in the future tense. If you've ever wanted to say things about the past or the future, this is the episode for you. So here's the agenda for today's lesson. We will do a quick review of the Tagalog verb types. Then we will talk about Tagalog pronouns so that we can make simple sentences. And then we will review very briefly the present tense conjugation of verbs. Then we'll jump right into the past tense conjugation patterns, and then the future tense conjugation patterns, and then some practice questions throughout as well. And then we'll finish off with a Taglish tip, which I think you will find very useful. Alrighty, so there are 5 main Tagalog verb types in Tagalog: mag, ma, in, and e verbs. And what makes them different is that some are actor-focused, like mag, ma, and and then some of these verbs are object-focused, like in, and e. So you can see that the verbs, some of them can be actor or object-focused, depending on the context of the sentence. And again, in lesson 3, I go over which types of verbs can be actor or object focused. So that's a really good episode to watch. Okay, so what does it mean to be an actor or an object focused verb? Well, an actor focused verb means that the subject is doing the action. For example, the boy is playing. Here, the subject is the boy, and he is doing the action. He is playing. So the focus here is on the subject. Whereas for an object-focused verb, the action is being done to the subject. For example, wash the dishes. Here, the subject is the dishes, and something is being done to them. They are going to be washed. So here the focus is more on the object, which is the dishes, versus when the focus is on a subject like a person or the actor. And then let's just review some subject pronouns. Ako is I, ka is you singular, siya is he or she. Again, this is gender neutral. You have to listen to the context of the sentence to figure out who someone is talking about. And again, just to point out the pronunciation, it looks like it should be pronounced siya, but it's usually pronounced sha. Sila is they, tayo is we inclusive, kami is we exclusive. We'll go back to that. Kayo is you plural. So you all as a class, kayo. So now let's go back to the 2 different types of we here. So tayo is all of us together. You and me and the whole class, we are all doing the action. So kumakain tayo. We are all eating. Kumakain tayo. So it's inclusive because everyone is doing the action. Versus kami means me and someone else. So me and my husband Chris, we are eating. Kumakain kami. We are eating. You're not doing the action. I'm just telling you about it. So maybe you're calling me and I'm like, oh, kumakain kami. We are eating. So that's exclusive. So the simplest sentence structure in Tagalog is verb plus pronoun. It's the opposite of English where the pronoun goes first. I am running. I am eating. So there the pronoun I goes first. But in Tagalog, it's the opposite. The verb goes first. So for example, let's take a look at the verb to cook, which is magluto. Using the subject pronouns we just learned, here are some simple sentences. Nagluluto ako. I am cooking. Nagluluto ako. Nagluluto ka, you are cooking. Nagluluto siya, he or she is cooking. Nagluluto sila, they are cooking. Nagluluto tayo, we are all cooking together. So remember, that's inclusive. We're all doing it. Nagluluto kami, we are cooking. So me and my husband Chris, nagluluto kami. That's exclusive. And then nagluluto kayo, you all are cooking. Maybe you all as a class, you all are cooking. So this is a good slide to know just because it shows how you can put the verb and the pronoun together, and then it shows how the different subject pronouns are used. Okay, so now just a review that all Tagalog verbs have a root, and then something is added to them, whether it's an affix at the beginning, maybe an infix in the middle, or even a suffix at the end, which we will see today. So something is added to the root to conjugate it to a different tense. So for example, the word magluto, to cook. In the present tense, it's nagluluto ako, I am cooking. Nagluluto ako. In the past tense, nagluto ako, I cooked. Nagluto. In the future tense, magluluto ako, I will cook. Magluluto. And I've underlined and bolded the root here. So luto, that's the root word of to cook. And then an affix is usually added to indicate the different tense. So you can see the different affixes there. And what I want you to get from this slide is that if you can pick out the root word in a conversation, then that's kind of half of the battle, right? Try to pick out root words that you can recognize and then use context clues to determine what is actually being said. So if I heard someone say, oh, nagluluto ako ngayon, then I would say, okay, I know luto means cook. Are they saying that they're cooking right now, or did they cook something yesterday, or will they be cooking tomorrow? So just kind of try to pick out the root words that you know and then kind of go from there for the translation of Tagalog. Okay, so all of that was a review from Lesson 3. Let's jump into the new material now of Lesson 4, the past tense conjugation patterns. So let's start with the mag verbs. These are usually actor-focused, and they are the most common type of verb in Tagalog. Some examples are maglakad, to walk, magluto, to cook, magbasa, to read. Now, in the past tense, you have to add the affix nag in the beginning. So now the pattern is nag plus the root. For example, maglakad in the past tense is naglakad. Naglakad ako, I walked. Naglakad siya, she walked. So naglakad is the past tense of to walk in Tagalog. Magluto becomes nagluto. Nagluto ako, I cooked. Nagluto ako ng kanin, I cooked some rice. So nagluto is the past tense of to cook. Magbasa becomes nagbasa. Nagbasa ako, I read. So nagbasa is the past tense of to read. So you can see how the pattern is nag plus the root, right? It's a little different from the present tense. Speaking of, let's go ahead and just compare the present tense to the past tense conjugation of mag verbs. So in the present tense, we learned naglalakad is walking. Naglalakad. If you recall, the present tense conjugation of mag verbs is nag plus the repeated first syllable plus the root. Naglalakad ako, I am walking. Naglalakad. The present tense conjugation of to cook is nagluto. Nagluto ako, I cooked. Then in the present tense, magbasa is nagbabasa. That means reading. Nagbabasa ako, I am reading. Now let's compare these to the past tense conjugation. This is what we learned today. So naglakad is walked. Nagluto is cooked. Nagbasa is read. So there is a slight difference here from the present tense to the past tense. There's no repeated sound, right? So naglalakad ako means I'm walking. Naglakad ako means I walked. So the difference between the tenses can be a little subtle. It's one of those things that you have to train your ear for, right? So for the present tense, you can hopefully recognize that there's a repeated sound. Naglalakad ako. Versus the past tense, naglakad. It's like done. There's no repeated sound. So that's kind of one way to distinguish between the present and the past tense conjugation of mag-verbs. All right, now let's take a look at ma-verbs. They have a very similar pattern. These are also actor-focused, and some examples are maligo, to shower, matulog, to sleep, manood, to watch. In the past tense, this is the pattern for ma-verbs. Now the affix is na, and then it's the root. For example, maligo becomes naligo. Naligo ako. I took a shower. Naligo siya. He took a shower. So it's just naligo. You jot it down. What do you think matulog and manood will be in the past tense? Just use this pattern that we learned, affix na and then the root. What do you think matulog and manood will be in the past tense? Okay, matulog, to sleep, in the past tense is natulog. Natulog ako. I went to sleep. Natulog ako. And then manood will be nanood. So, nanood ako ng sine. I watched a movie. So again, we are just using this pattern, affix na plus the root, and that is how you change ma-verbs into the past tense. Let's compare. So in the present tense, I think it'll help if I put them both up together. So in the present tense, shower is naliligo. I am taking a shower. Naliligo ako. Naliligo. In the past tense, it's naligo. Naligo ako. Naligo. That's showered. I took a shower. For the verb matulog, in the present tense, it's natutulog siya. So natutulog is sleeping. In the past tense, it's natulog. That means slept. Then for the verb manood, in the present tense, it's nanonood. Nanonood ako. I am watching something. In the past tense, it's nanood. Nanood ako. I watched something. So it is a very similar pattern to the mag verbs. The only difference is that it doesn't have the G in the affix. But you can see here in the present tense, there is that repeated syllable, whereas in the past tense, there is no repeated syllable. It's just the affix, then the root. All right, so now let's take a look at verbs. These can be actor or object focused depending on the context, and here are some examples. Kain means to eat. Takbo means to run. Tawa means to laugh. And again, you might be wondering, why are these verbs? There is no in there. Is the infix that is put into the word to conjugate it in the present tense. But in the past tense, this is the pattern. So goes after the first letter when you're using it in the past. For example, kain, to eat, becomes kumain. Kumain ako. I ate. Kumain. Takbo becomes tumakbo. Tumakbo siya. He ran. Tumakbo. So again, the infix just goes after the first letter. Tumakbo. You give it a try. What do you think tawa, to laugh, will be in the past tense? Just use that pattern that we learned. Tawa in the past tense becomes tumawa. Tumawa sila. They laughed. Tumawa. So again, we are just adding the infix after the first letter. So now let's compare. In the present tense, kain is kumakain. Kumakain ako. I am eating. Kumakain ako. In the past tense, it's kumain. Kumain ako. I ate. Kumain. For the word takbo, in the present tense, it's tumatakbo. That means running. Tumatakbo siya. He is running. In the past tense, it's tumakbo. He ran. Tumakbo. Then for the word tawa, which means to laugh, in the present tense, it's tumatawa. Tumatawa sila. They are laughing. Tumatawa. In the past tense, it's tumawa. Tumawa sila. They laughed. Tumawa. Again, if you need to review the present tense conjugation patterns for verbs, be sure to watch lesson 3 because I go over all of that and there are practice questions as well. All right, so let's take a look at verbs. These are usually object focused, and here are some examples. Gamit means to use. Walis means to sweep. In the past tense, the infix in goes after the first letter. So gamit, to use, in the past tense is ginamit. Ginamit ko, I used something. Ginamit. So you can see in just goes after the first letter. You jot it down. What do you think walis, to sweep, will be in the past tense? Walis in the past tense will be winalis. Winalis ko yung sahig. I swept the floor. Winalis. So let's compare. In the present tense, using is ginagamit. Ginagamit ko. I am using something. Past tense, ginamit. That means I used something. Ginamit ko. In the present tense, to sweep is winawalis. That means sweeping, winawalis. In the past tense, it's winalis. Winalis ko yung sahig. I swept the floor. So it looks like for the most part when a verb is conjugated in the past tense, the conjugation is usually shorter. There's not a repeated syllable, there's no repeated sound or anything like that. So that's kind of one way to recognize if something is being conjugated in the past. Usually it's a shorter word. All right, so now lastly, let's take a look at verbs. These are usually object focused, and here are some examples. Isara means to close. Ibigay means to give. Itago means to hide. In the past tense, the infix in goes after the second letter for verbs. So let's take a look at the word isara, which means to close. In the past tense, it becomes isinara. Isinara ko yung pinto. The in goes after the second letter. Isinara. Next, the word ibigay, which means to give, becomes ibinigay. Ibinigay ko yung regalo. I gave the gift. Ibinigay. Alrighty, you give it a try. What do you think itago, to hide, will be in the past tense? Remember to just use this pattern that we learned. Itago in the past tense becomes itinago. The in just goes after the second letter. Itinago ko, I hid something. Itinago. Now let's compare. In the present tense, isara is isinasara, closing. Isinasara. In the past tense, it's isinara, closed. Isinara. In the present tense, ibigay becomes ibinibigay. Ibinibigay, that means giving. In the past tense, it's ibinigay, gave. Ibinigay. Lastly, itago, which means to hide, in the present tense is itinatago. That means hiding. Itinatago. In the past tense, it's itinago, hid. Itinago. So those are all of the past tense conjugation patterns for the different types of verbs in Tagalog. I will go ahead and turn off my screen so that we can do some practice questions. All right, so up here in the top left corner are the conjugation patterns that we just learned for all of the different types of verbs. Then here are some subject pronouns that we learned. And then the sentence structure is verb plus pronoun, and then the time goes at the end. And then here are some vocabulary terms to indicate past tense. So kahapon is yesterday, kahapon. Kanina is earlier, kanina. Nung isang araw means the other day, nung isang araw. Nung isang linggo is the other week or last week. Nung isang buwan means the other month or last month. Nung isang taon means the other year or last year. Okay, now let's take a look at these examples here. So he watched a movie yesterday, and I gave you a hint. To watch is manood. So if we were going to do this together, let's review here that the sentence structure is verb plus pronoun plus time. So the verb here is manood. In the past tense, ma verbs, the pattern is affix na and then the root. So it becomes nanood. Then it's the pronoun siya, he. Nang sine, a movie, kahapon, yesterday. So in our sentence structure, I didn't point out where an object would go. It would go before the time. So nanood siya ng sine kahapon. He watched a movie yesterday. Nanood siya ng sine kahapon. Now you give it a try. You answer 2 through 5. You can pause the video now if you need more time, and then we will go over it. Alrighty, we'll go ahead and go over the answers. So she ran earlier. Remember, the sentence structure is verb plus pronoun plus time. So it would be, tumakbo siya kanina. She ran earlier. Tumakbo siya kanina. Number 3, you all cleaned the other day. Maglinis means to clean. Naglinis kayo nung isang araw. Naglinis kayo nung isang araw. You all cleaned the other day. Number 4, we ate some adobo. Kain is to eat. And I wanted you to use the inclusive we, so everyone is eating. Or everyone ate, sorry. Kumain tayo ng adobo. We all ate some adobo. Kumain tayo ng adobo. And then number 5, they walked the other month. Maglakad means to walk. That would be naglakad sila nung isang buwan. They walked the other month. Naglakad sila nung isang buwan. Now, if you noticed, all of these examples are asking about mag, ma, and verbs. Because they are actor-focused, we can use subject pronouns. But if you wanted to use an in or e verb, you actually have to use a possessive pronoun. Remember, for an object-focused verb, the subject here is an object, so we have to use a possessive pronoun because it's almost like the person possesses that object that is in focus. Okay, so that's kind of why we have to use a possessive pronoun. And then the sentence structure now would be verb plus pronoun plus the word yung, which means the. Sometimes it can be ang. They are interchangeable usually. Then it's the noun and then time. And then again, down here in the bottom left corner are the vocab terms to indicate past tense. And let's take a look at some examples. So number 1, I used the car the other week. And I gave you some hints. Gamit means to use. Coche means car. So let's do this one together. So the sentence structure is verb plus pronoun. So it would be ginamit. That is the past tense conjugation of gamit. Remember, for in verbs, the infix in goes after the first letter. So ginamit. Then it's the pronoun ko, which is the possessive pronoun I. Then it's the word yung, which means the. Coche nung isang linggo. So, ginamit ko yung kotse nung isang linggo. I used the car the other week. Go ahead and try 2, 3, and 4. You can pause the video now if you need more time. And remember to just plug in all of the words into this sentence structure. Remember to use the patterns that we learned, and also remember to use possessive pronouns because we are using an object-focused verb now. Okay, go ahead and do these examples and we'll go over it in just a bit. All right, let's go ahead and start with number 2. He closed the door earlier. Isara means to close. Pinto means door. This would be, isinara niya yung pinto kanina. Isinara niya yung pinto kanina. He closed the door earlier. So again, remember for e-verbs, the in just goes after the second letter. Then it's the pronoun niya, which is he or she in the possessive pronouns. Then it's the word yung, which means the. Then it's the noun pinto, which means door. Earlier is kanina. So we are just plugging all of the words into the sentence structure and then using the conjugation patterns that we learned. Okay, number 3, you all swept the floor yesterday. Walis means to sweep, sahig means floor. Winalis ninyo yung sahig kahapon. Winalis ninyo yung sahig kahapon. You all swept the floor yesterday. And lastly, they hid the toys the other month. Itago means to hide. Mga laruan means toys. And to make a noun plural, you have to add this word mga. So mga laruan means toys. It's not like in English where we can just add an S. You actually have to add this word mga. In Tagalog, this would be, itinago nila yung mga laruan nung isang buwan. Itinago nila yung mga laruan nung isang buwan. They hid the toys the other month. All right, so these are just some examples of how to use the past tense conjugation patterns that we learned and how you can plug in all the vocabulary that you learned into this simple sentence structure. Alrighty, now let's go ahead and jump right into the future tense conjugation patterns of these verbs. Let's start with mag verbs. Again, our mag verbs are maglakad to walk, magluto to cook, magbasa to read. Now in the future tense, this is the pattern. Now it's the affix mag, then there's a repeated first syllable, and then the root. So in the future tense, if you wanted to say will walk, maglakad becomes maglalakad. So it's the affix mag, then there's a repeated first syllable, and then it's the root, lakad. So maglalakad ako, I will walk, maglalakad. Magluto, to cook, in the future tense will be magluluto. Again, the affix is mag, then there's a repeated first syllable, and then the root. Magluluto sila, they will cook. Lastly, magbasa, to read, becomes magbabasa. Magbabasa ako, I will read. So let's compare all of these tenses together. And let's just take a look at the highlighted ones. So in the present tense, to walk, it is naglalakad. That means walking, naglalakad. In the past tense, to walk is naglakad, walked, naglakad. In the future tense, it's maglalakad, maglalakad. That is will walk. So future tense and present tense are very similar for mag verbs. The only difference is the first letter. So it's one of those things where you have to listen very carefully, but also rely on the context clues in case you miss what that first letter was. Okay, so it is a very similar pattern for present and future tense conjugation of mag verbs. Next, let's take a look at ma verbs. It's a very similar pattern to the mag verbs. Again, here are some ma verbs. Maligo, to shower. Matulog, to sleep. Manood, to watch. In the future tense, here is the pattern for ma verbs. Now the affix is ma, then there's a repeated first syllable, and then it's the root. So maligo, to shower, in the future tense will be maliligo. The affix is ma, then there's a repeated first syllable, and then it's the root. Maliligo ako, I will take a shower. You jot it down. What do you think matulog, to sleep, and manood, to watch, will be in the future tense? And remember to just use this new pattern. Okay, in the future tense, matulog to sleep will be matutulog. Matutulog ako. I will go to sleep. Matutulog. So the affix is ma, then there's a repeated first syllable, and then the root. Matutulog. And then manood, to watch, will be manunood. Affix is ma, then there's a repeated first syllable, and then the root. Manunood ako. I will watch. Now let's compare all of the tenses together for ma verbs. Let's just take a look at the highlighted ones. Maligo means to shower. In the present tense, it's naliligo ako. Showering, taking a shower. Naliligo ako. In the past tense, it's naligo, showered. Naligo. In the future tense, it's maliligo. Maliligo ako. I will take a shower. Again, for ma verbs, it's a very similar pattern for present and future tense conjugation. The only difference is that first letter. But they both have that repeated first syllable. So again, try to listen carefully or try to rely on the context clues so that you can figure out what they're talking about. Okay, next, verbs. Our verbs are kain, to eat, takbo, to run, tawa, to laugh. Now the pattern for verbs is you repeat the first syllable. So take a look at this. Kain, to eat, becomes kakain. Kakain ako, I will eat. Kakain ako ng pansit. I will eat some pansit. So it's very interesting because now there's no infix at all for future tense conjugation of verbs. You just simply repeat the first syllable. So let's take a look at takbo, which means to run. Takbo in the future tense becomes tatakbo. Tatakbo sila. They will run. Tatakbo. Again, you're just repeating the first syllable. You give it a try. What do you think tawa, to laugh, will be in the future tense? All right, tawa will be tatawa. Tatawa sila, they will laugh. So you're just repeating the first syllable for the future tense conjugation of verbs. Very interesting. They just dropped the altogether. So let's go ahead and compare all of the conjugation patterns for verbs. We'll just take a look at the verb kain here, highlighted in yellow. In the present tense, to eat, it's kumakain. Kumakain ako. I am eating. Kumakain. In the past tense, it's kumain. Kumain ako. I ate. And then in the future tense, it's kakain. Kakain ako. I will eat. So very interesting. All of the conjugation patterns are different for verbs here. Then in verbs, some examples are gamit, to use, walis, to sweep. Now the pattern for future tense conjugation of verbs is that you have to repeat the first syllable, then it's the root, then goes at the end. So take a look at the word gamit, which means to use. In the future tense, it would be gagamitin. Gagamitin ko yung kotse. I will use the car. Gagamitin. So you repeat the first syllable, then it's the root, then it's at the end. So this is very interesting. We haven't seen a suffix yet, so the goes at the end of the word. This is the first time we've seen this. You jot it down. What do you think walis, to sweep, will be in the future tense? And just use this pattern. All right, walis in the future tense will be wawalisin. Wawalisin ko yung sahig. I will sweep the floor. Wawalisin. So again, you just repeat the first syllable, then it's the root, and then goes at the end. Let's compare all of the conjugation patterns for verbs. We'll just take a look at the ones highlighted in yellow. So gamit means to use. In the present tense, it's ginagamit, using, ginagamit. In the past tense, it's ginamit, used, ginamit. And then the future tense, gagamitin, will use, gagamitin. So very interesting there. Lastly, e-verbs. Some examples are isara, to close, ibigay, to give, itago, to hide. Now, for the future tense conjugation of e-verbs, you would just repeat the second syllable. Isara, to close, becomes isasara. Isasara ko yung pinto. I will close the door. Isasara. You just repeat the second syllable. You give it a try. What do you think ibigay, to give, and itago, to hide, will be in the future tense? And just follow this pattern. Okay? Ibigay will be ibibigay. Ibibigay ko yung regalo. I will give the gift. Ibibigay. And then itago, to hide, will be itatago. Itatago ko yung pera. I will hide the money. Itatago. So again, you are just repeating the second syllable. Let's go ahead and compare all of these conjugation patterns for e-verbs. In the present tense, isara, to close, is isinasara. Isinasara. That means closing. Isinasara. Past tense, it's isinara, closed. Isinara. And then in the future tense, it's isasara, will close. Isasara. All right, so those are all of the future tense conjugation patterns for the verb types in Tagalog. Now let's do some practice questions. I'm going to go ahead and turn off my screen again. Now in the top left corner are the future tense conjugation patterns that we learned for all of the verbs. Then are the subject pronouns. And then it's the sentence structure down in the bottom left corner. And now in the green are some vocabulary terms to indicate future tense. So bukas is tomorrow. Bukas. Mamaya means later. Mamaya. Sa susunod na linggo, next week. Sa susunod na buwan, next month. And sa susunod na taon, next year. Now here are some examples. Let's do the first one together. I will watch a movie tomorrow. Manood means to watch. So again, let's take a look at our sentence structure. It should be verb plus pronoun plus time. Manonood is the future tense conjugation of manood. Manonood, ako means I. Nang sine, bukas means tomorrow. Manunood ako ng sine bukas. I will watch a movie tomorrow. Again, if you're going to add an object, it would just go right before time. So you give it a try. You can pause the video now if you need. You do numbers 2 through 5 and we'll go over them in just a bit. All right, let's start with number 2. They will run later. Takbo means to run. Tatakbo sila mamaya. Tatakbo sila mamaya. Number 3, we exclusive will clean next week. Maglinis means to clean. Maglilinis kami sa susunod na linggo. Maglilinis kami sa susunod na linggo. We will clean next week. Number 4, you singular will eat pansit later. Kain means to eat. Kakain ka ng pansit mamaya. Kakain ka ng pansit mamaya. And then lastly, she will walk next month. Maglakad. Maglalakad siya sa susunod na buwan. Maglalakad siya sa susunod na buwan. All right. Again, these examples focus on the mag, ma, and verbs. Since they are actor-focused, we can use subject pronouns. But if we want to use in or e verbs, we actually have to use possessive pronouns. Remember, when we are using object-focused verbs, we have to use a possessive pronoun because it's almost like the subject or the person is in possession of that object. And the sentence structure is verb plus pronoun plus the word yung, which means the. Then it's the noun, then it's time. And again, the box in green has the vocabulary terms to indicate future tense. And now let's do these examples. Let's start with number 1. We exclusive will use the car later. Gamit means to use. Kotse means car. So let's take a look at the sentence structure. The verb should come first. So the future tense conjugation of gamit, let's take a look at in verbs. Repeat the first syllable, then it's the root, then you add in at the end. So it would be gagamitin. Gagamitin, then it's we exclusive, namin, yung kotse mamaya. Gagamitin namin yung kotse mamaya. You give it a try. You can pause the video now. You try 2, 3, and 4. Just plug in the vocabulary into the sentence structure and then use the conjugation patterns for in and e verbs. Go ahead and do that and we'll check it in just a bit. Alrighty, let's go ahead and do number 2. He will close the store next week. Isara means to close. Tindahan means store. Isasara niya yung tindahan sa susunod na taon. Isasara niya yung tindahan sa susunod na taon. He will close the store next week. Number 3, you all will sweep the floor tomorrow. Walis means to sweep. Sahig means floor. Wawalisin ninyo yung sahig bukas. Wawalisin ninyo yung sahig bukas. You all will sweep the floor tomorrow. And lastly, number 4, they will hide the toys next month. Itago means to hide. Mga laruan means toys. Itatago nila yung mga laruan sa susunod na buwan. Itatago nila yung mga laruan sa susunod na buwan. So these are just some examples on how to use the future tense conjugation of these verbs. And it gives a good practice on how to use this sentence structure where the verb comes first, then it's the pronoun, and then sometimes an object, and then the time goes at the end. So hopefully you can recognize this pattern when you hear native Tagalog speakers speaking Tagalog. Now I want to finish off our lesson with a quick Taglish tip. And Taglish is Tagalog and English put together. I am a big supporter of using Taglish. I think it's a great stepping stone for learning new vocabulary, especially while you are learning a new language. It's not very attainable to try and speak a language fluently right away, and no one is making you do that, okay? So take your time, try to use as much Tagalog as you can, even if that means having to use Taglish or Tagalog and English put together in a sentence. So let's take a look at these examples. I drove yesterday. She will swim later. They jumped earlier. We didn't learn these verbs. We didn't learn to drive. We also didn't learn to swim or to jump. But you can always turn them into a mug verb. So that means mug plus the English verb. Then conjugate it like you would in the past or the future as a mug verb. And then you can use subject pronouns in your sentence. So let's take a look at number 1, I drove yesterday. What if I told you to use mug drive? Now conjugate it in the past tense because it's drove. I drove yesterday. It would be nag-drive. Nag-drive ako kahapon. I drove yesterday. Nag-drive ako kahapon. So see, we are just using the pattern that we've already learned and using this mug plus an English verb. So go ahead and try number 2 and 3. You can use mug swim and mug jump. And then we'll go over it in just a second. Alrighty, for number 2, she will swim later. If I told you to use mug swim, it would be magsiswim siya mamaya. Magsiswim siya mamaya. So again, for the future tense conjugation of a mug verb, it's mug plus the repeated first syllable plus the root. Magsiswim siya mamaya. She will swim later. Lastly, they jumped earlier. If I told you to use mug jump, it would be nagjump sila kanina. The affix is nag, then it's the root for a past tense conjugation of mag-verbs. So, nag-jump sila kanina. So, that is just a quick way to use Taglish, but I do encourage you to go back and look up these words in Tagalog so that you can say the whole phrase in Tagalog eventually. For example, to drive in Tagalog is magmaneho. So this would actually be nagmaneho ako kahapon. I drove yesterday. Nagmaneho ako kahapon. To swim is langoy. So this would be lalangoy siya mamaya. Langoy is an verb. So lalangoy siya mamaya. And then lastly, talon. Talon means to jump. So tumalon sila kanina. It's also an verb. So those are just some ways to use Taglish in a conversation. Now, you don't want to rely on Taglish forever. The goal is to hopefully get fluent in Tagalog. So look up words that you don't know so that you can say the whole phrase in Tagalog eventually. Alrighty, well, we learned so much in today's lesson. Here's just a quick recap. We reviewed the different types of Tagalog verbs and the pronouns that we can use in a simple sentence. Then we reviewed the present tense conjugation of these verbs and then jumped right into the past and future tense patterns. Then we did some practice questions and then finished off with a Taglish tip, which I hope you can start using in your everyday conversations. Again, I strongly encourage you to watch lessons 3 and 4 together because they build on each other. Be sure to take detailed notes so that you can keep all of these conjugation patterns straight. Hopefully, this will help you recognize some of these patterns and recognize the tenses and definitely root words now that you know some vocabulary when you're listening to Tagalog speakers. If you would like some more Tagalog resources, please follow me on Instagram, TikTok, and Facebook, where I post shorter videos throughout the week that will help you learn Tagalog on the go. I also have an Instagram subscription if you would like extended videos and also a monthly newsletter where I recap all of my Tagalog lessons that I post on Instagram. I also have a Stan store where I have some products and then sometimes some group classes if they are available. You might want to check that out. And lastly, feel free to check out my Amazon storefront where I have links to some fun products about the Filipino culture, which I think you might enjoy. Well, thank you again for spending some time with me. I hope to see you in the next Tagalog Time episode. Paalam!